our partners. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you all for joining us on another auspicious evening with another fantastic guest. Before we start, my name is Paul Charney. I'm chairman of the Zionist Federation. We will be taking questions after our special guest speaker, Hen Mazzig. He will be speaking, and then you should feel free to ask your questions. The questions you can post either on the chat, and there's a chat button at the top. We will try and get to as many of those questions, or you can message us on Facebook. Little bit of housekeeping, if everyone can ensure that their computer is muted so that we can get best reception, bearing in mind the technology. So please mute your screens. And on that note, we'll get to questions thereafter. I'd like to begin. So tonight we have Hen Mazzig. For those of you who don't know who Hen is renowned around the world as a fantastic, phenomenally active speaker on behalf of Israel. A little bit about Hen, which I know I'm sure he wouldn't want me to go on. I can go on for quite a while, so I'll try and cut a little bit shorter. Hen is, as an Israeli speaker and writer, inspired thousands with a phenomenal backstory of his life. He's the son of Mizrahi Jewish refugees from Iraq and North Africa. And he's an important voice today, especially in this discussion, sharing his family story of the 850,000 Jewish refugees from Middle East and North Africa. As a young Israeli, Hen served in the IDF for almost 5 years as an openly gay Israeli IDF commander. He worked as during his service, he was a lieutenant in the Kogat unit, which is the cooperation between the Palestinian Authority, the UN, and many non-governmental organizations in dealing with those territories, specifically operated in the West Bank. Hen has been awarded with many articles in many different publications, including the LA Times, NBC News, Haaretz, The Forward, Jewish Chronicle, International Business Times, and many more. He shared his story with thousands and thousands across the USA, Canada, the UK, and other places over the last 8 years. In September 2016, Hen started working as a freelance consultant to help pro-Israel groups like the Zionist Federation with getting the message out there and with all the social justice causes that he works hard for. He volunteers as head of the Transgender and Health Department at the National Israeli LGBTQ Task Force, also known as the Nir Kates Center in Tel Aviv. Hen is very active on social media and has a proven track record of creating dialogue where there is none and changing hearts and minds where it almost seemed impossible. So I'm going to stop there because people didn't log in to hear me speak about Hen. They want to hear you speak. Welcome, thank you, and the platform is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me. Thank you to the Zionist Federation and WZO, I believe, for hosting this event. It's a pleasure to be with you and having such an audience tuning in to listen to this conversation during Pride, talking about LGBTQ rights in Israel and Israel as a whole. And I think Pride is more than just about LGBTQ issues. So thank you all for joining. I've just to point out, I volunteered at the Nir Kates Center. I no longer work there, but I'll talk about that later on as well. And we're, I'm joining you from Tel Aviv, and during this time last year, I was probably marching the Pride Parade that is canceled this year, unfortunately. So it's a real pleasure to be able to speak to you all and to share the message of Pride, because it's such an important one. And I think, as I said, when we're talking about Pride, we're talking about being authentic to who you are and accepting who you are. And for me, it was a process to come out as a gay person, but it also was a process to come out in really accepting my identity. And it started with my family. It took me years until I really, until I was a teenager, when I was really, I was made aware of where my family came from, but I never took real pride in it until I was a teenager, when I started speaking with my grandmother and hearing stories about their lives in the Middle East and in North Africa. And my grandparents from my father's side are Tunisian Jews. They came to Israel in the early 50s from Tunisia, from Jerba and Sfax, two cities in Tunisia. And when I grew up, I didn't know that, that it was hard for them in those countries until I started asking questions. And then I found out more and more details, like that my family faced hardship in Tunisia during World War II, where the Nazis, the Vichy regime was controlling North Africa. My grandfather and grandmother from my father's side had to work in a forced labor camp and really were victimized by the Nazis and were supposed to be sent to death camp in Europe, and then the war was over and they were liberated. But growing up, I didn't even know about this part of my history. Only when I really started being made aware of it by asking questions. And from my mother's side, from my Iraqi family, they came also in 1951. And the stories about Iraq that I grew up with were always about how amazing Iraq was for them and how, they had a great time there. But the more I asked questions, I understood that there's some sort of romanticization of the past. And I found out that they really went through a lot of hardships, like the Farhud, like during those 2 days of violent attacks against the Jewish community of Iraq, where my grandmother witnessed real horrors in Iraq. And in 1951, they're packing everything they have and they're coming to Israel. I'm always starting with the story because no matter what topic I'm speaking about in regards to Israel and the Middle East, I'm always sharing the story of my family because I believe it's, first of all, it's very important for people to hear about it and to learn about it. But it's, for me, it's almost as if it was forgotten from the pages of history and from much of the conversation about Israel and the Middle East. The fact that 55% of Israeli Jews today are descendant of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. When people talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and we're seeing it a lot today in America, they're talking about it in terms of race, and race does not play any part in this conflict. My family were, they were in Iraq for centuries. The Jewish community is scattered throughout the world. Of course, some of us went to Iraq, to Yemen, to Europe, to Spain, to all over the world, and then we returned to our homeland. And I'm very privileged that I was born here and not in those countries today, when I'm looking at the countries that my family came from and how intolerant they are to LGBTQ folks. And when I grew up in Israel, I always, I was waiting to join the army. It's something that every Israeli, it's a mandatory service. So men serve for 3 years, women serve for 2 years, although today they're talking about decreasing the amount of months that a men serve and then raising the months that female soldiers serve. And when I grew up, growing up in Israel, most of my friends were talking about joining combat units. They wanted to fight for the country, because when you grow up with a lot of violence around you, you really want to do something to make a difference. You want to participate in this in the important work of protecting your family. A lot of people don't know that, but people that live abroad, maybe non-Jewish people that live abroad, they don't understand that when we're talking about the Israeli Defense Forces, we're talking about an army of soldiers that are driving 2 hours from their house for, to fight wars or to defend their homeland. We're not sending soldiers thousands of miles away from their homes to fight for gas or oil or democracy or values. That's not the wars that we're fighting. The wars that we're fighting are wars to defend our borders. And that's why when we grow up, we want to do something that can really bring security to our families, because our families' life are always on the line when we're talking about our military service. But while most of my friends wanted to join army units that were doing proper security, I decided to join a very unique unit in the Israeli army. It's called the Kogat unit, the Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories. It's the humanitarian unit of the Israeli army. It's a unit that works throughout the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and in the Gaza Strip on the border. And our work is basically to work with Palestinian civilians and coordinate between them to the Israeli authorities, to the IDF, to the non-governmental organizations that are working in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria and Gaza. So I was stationed first in Hebron, first in Ramallah, then in Hebron, then in Jerusalem periphery. My job was to be the liaison to the UN and the international organizations. And back then I was still in the closet. And I remember that I always thought it's going to be very challenging to come out. And I had some thoughts that I might just have to stay in the closet forever, which was a very sad thing for a person to think about. But I had a commander in the army, and he was really like a role model for me. And I remember I was very heavy back then when I was a teenager. I was twice my size now. And this commander always told me, Hen, one day you're going to go to officer training school and you're going to become an officer. And I said that I don't think it's going to happen because I was very heavy. But he said, no, you're going to do it. And I believed him. I hoped it will happen. And I remember that the time that I really started thinking about coming out was when I went to meet a good friend of mine, a combat soldier, Israeli, tough guy. My friend, his name was Alon, and Alon told me, he said, listen, Hen, I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I wanted you to know that I think I'm gay. And I said, what? There's no way, you're the straightest guy I ever know. He was really a tough guy. And he said, no, I think I am. And I said, wow, maybe it's just a phase. Said some bad things that I shouldn't have said. And Alon says, no, I just want you to accept me. And I said, of course I accept you. And I went back home. And then I started thinking, how did he do it? How did he came out? He's in my mind, he was such a what I called back then straight guy that it was surprising. And the following day I went back to the army and I saw my commander and he said, what's wrong? And I said, well, my best friend just came out of the closet and it's very hard for me. And he said, why is that hard? And I said, well, just because he's a combat soldier and I don't know how he's going to deal with it and how his family will accept him and how his friends in the army will accept him. And my commander said, Hen, I think there's something else. And I'm saying, what else? And he says, well, it's pretty clear that you're also gay. So not helping me out of the closet, pulling me out of the closet. And for the first time in my life, I'm saying to my army commander that, yeah, I think I am gay. And there was a long moment of silence. And then he said, okay, but there's a bigger issue here. I'm saying, what? I just came out of the closet for the first time. Can I just get a moment to breathe? And he says, yeah, take your time. Do you need a hug? And I said, I don't need a hug. Leave me alone. And he says, there is the bigger issue is that you have a crush on your best friend. Which he was right, because I did have a crush on him. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you a day off. I want you to go back home. I want you to confess your love to Alon. And I want you to come back tomorrow and tell me you have a boyfriend. So I'm driving back home from back then I served in Ramallah. And it's, I'm getting home, I'm getting cute and getting ready to meet my best friend and to come out of the closet to him and hopefully ask me to be my boyfriend. And I'm going to his house and I'm waiting outside and he comes outside and he says, let's go. And I'm saying, before we go, I wanted to tell you something. And he says, what? And I said, well, what you did was very brave. And I wanted you to know that I think I'm gay too. And he said, what? No way. You're the straightest guy I ever met. You can't be gay. Thinking the same thing about me. And I said, no, I think I am gay. And he said, oh, that's so cool. And then he shows me pictures of other guys that he's going to go on dates with. And I'm getting very visibly upset. And he says, what's wrong? And I said, well, I think I wanted us to go on a date together. And he looks at me and he says, well, I can't date you because now that you're gay, you need to understand there's leagues. And you can date people that are fat like you. He actually said the word fat. And I'm dating people that look like me, that are fit. Really breaking my heart in this moment. And I remember I had tears in my eyes, and I went to the car, got back into my car, drove home, couldn't listen to what he said, put on Adele, crying my heart out. And the following day I went back to the army, and my commander, I remember seeing me, was like nodding his head and saying, what's wrong? Come to my office. And I said, well, you just ruined my life because I came out of the closet. I won't be able to be an officer now because everyone knows I'm gay. And I lost the love of my life. And it's all because you told me to come out of the closet. And he said, listen, Hen, you're going to be the best officer the IDF ever had. And I'm going to promise you that. And the most important thing is that this guy is not the love of your life, because the love of your life will not treat you this way. And now that I have today, when I have the love of my life, I know that it's true, that someone disrespects you this way, they're not worthy of your love. And after that day, my commander and I started working out together, and what started at what was 5 minutes running turned into a whole hour, and actually passed the test to the officer training school, became an officer. I finished first in my battalion in officer training school. And I was appointed to be the liaison officer to international organizations in the UN in Hebron. And to be, that story was in 2008, when other countries had policies of don't ask, don't tell. I mean, until this day, other countries when their armies are dealing with challenges of accepting LGBTQ soldiers, specifically trans soldiers. And that's something that Israel was, years ahead of them in combining LGBTQ soldiers and allowing them to serve to serve openly. Now, being an openly gay commander or LGBTQ soldier in the army does not mean that that I went to every base with a pride flag and told everyone that I'm the gay officer. It just meant that I had the backing of my commanders, that if a soldier misbehaved, because I'm gay, or if a soldier said something that wasn't proper, if other soldiers had difficulties and challenges for being an LGBTQ person, and I had a few soldiers coming out of the closet to me, I could support them, and I had the backing of my commanders. One time a soldier made an homophobic remark towards me, and my commander sent them to prison, army prison, for 2 weeks for a homophobic remark, which was really amazing for me to see. But the most important thing was the message that it sent to other soldiers, and that's something that I'm very proud of. To see that it happens throughout the IDF and everywhere in the IDF. It doesn't mean that we're perfect, and there's bad apples in every army and in every society, but a society is measured by how it's dealing with with those bad apples. And I'm very proud of the IDF and the fact that I felt really protected, so much so that I came out to my own commander rather than coming out to my family. I came out to my family later on, in later stage, and that's still a challenge for Mizrahi family to deal with because of the societies they came from. But they're getting there, and and I ended up serving for 5 years, and after military service, I started traveling around the world and sharing my story and the story of my family and the story that I just shared with you. And often I ran into ridiculous accusations against Israel about how we are, I don't know if you heard this term, pinkwashing. Pinkwashing is a term that was used to call out commercial companies that were putting pink ribbon on their products to say that they are donating the profits that they are making from the products to fighting breast cancer, because when they didn't really donate much, the term emerged that calling it pinkwashing. And now it's been appropriated by anti-Israel people all over the world that are saying that Israel is pinkwashing, which means sending people like myself or other LGBTQ folks around the world and pushing us to whitewash the atrocities, the alleged atrocities that are happening here. And that's, it's just another way of really erasing all of the achievements that that Israel has done in with not only with LGBTQ issues, but in general with social justice. Everything positive about Israel is now being immediately being erased as propaganda. And this term of pinkwashing is just so offensive. And you're seeing today in by several LGBTQ groups that this term is being adopted. And just last year there was a lesbian march in DC where they told the participants not to bring LGBTQ flags with Jewish star on them, or at least to not put the Jewish star in the middle. In Chicago, they forced out a lesbian couple that had one of them had a Star of David flag with her. And that's something that we're seeing increasing, that in the LGBTQ communities, LGBTQ Israelis and Jewish LGBTQ activists are being really shut down, silenced, and forced out. And it's really disheartening, because from a community that established itself on being inclusive, on fighting horrific violence and intolerance because of our identity, to do the same thing to other community just because they're Jewish or just because they're Israelis, is really heartbreaking for me. And I think, Israel is not perfect, and it's important to remember that Israel is a country, and Jews are people. Although a lot of people don't think that we are real people, we are real people, and we make mistakes, as I said before, and. But there's a lot to celebrate. I mean, there's from 1963 was the first time that same-sex relationship in Israel was decriminalized. And then later on in the 80s that it was actually protected by law. This progress is keeping on happening. And just a couple of years ago, I remember that I went down to Tel Aviv, to just a few blocks from my house, where hundreds of thousands of Israelis came together to protest same-sex surrogacy laws that discriminate against, surrogacy laws in Israel that are discriminating against same-sex couples. And that's something that we're fighting to change. And I know that that today it's part of the agenda in the government, in the Knesset, where there's the record number of openly LGBTQ people, MKs, and for the first time ever, we had a gay minister, Minister Amir Ohana, which it doesn't matter what you think or where you stand on his ideology and politics, which, everyone in Israel disagree with anyone else about politics. Like, you can't find two people that agree on anything political in Israel. But, the fact that there's a representation for the LGBTQ community, and specifically with the minister, is a huge achievement, and something that we should celebrate, that we must celebrate. That's part of this part of the problem that we have when we speak about those communities that are weaponizing their queer identity against LGBTQ Israelis. And there is a big struggle that is I believe one of the biggest challenges that we have as a community, that we still can get married in Israel. And I think it's even more important, before surrogacy laws and before anything else, that we can, while we are protected and while we have all those rights, and the police protects us. And when I volunteered in the Nir Kates Center, I remember how we, every time I sent a request or report about LGBTQ phobia incidents in Israel, immediately it was taken care of. And if someone was companies really afraid of being tainted as anti-LGBTQ. But this this issue of not being able to get married, that is, I believe, is a basic human rights, and it shouldn't be discriminated. And it's not, we're not discriminated because we're LGBTQ. There's just a problem with the marriage institution in Israel that it's being run by religious groups. So the Rabbinical Council is the one that will approve Jewish wedding. The Islamic Waqf will allow Muslim weddings, and the Christian Church, I guess, in Jerusalem would approve Christian weddings. So just a Jew is able to marry a Jew, or a Muslim to a Muslim, and a Christian to a Christian. And also part of it is the part of the same-sex marriage. So civil partnership is something that we have to work on, and I know it's something that Israelis are trying to change. The Tel Aviv municipality just last week announced that they're going to recognize same-sex marriage. So it's small and doesn't mean a lot. I mean, they will accept same-sex couples that are registering as same-sex couples in the municipality, and will give them the benefits that they can give them as a municipality. But the recognition itself is still something that we're fighting for. Although if a couple is married abroad, that's important to say. If a wedding was performed abroad and the couple returned to Israel, a same-sex couple, they are able to register as in civil partnership in Israel and receive the same tax benefits and any other elements of married couple. So that's basically, that's part of what we have to do. We have to work on changing that and improve the situation for LGBTQ folks. But with all the criticism, we have to remember that Israel is still a Middle Eastern country, and it's a country that surrounded by other countries where LGBTQ folks are being oppressed on daily basis. That gay people are being hanged just a few hours drive from here. That in Gaza, the situation for LGBTQ people is still terrible. And I don't mean to say that as in, look at how bad they are and how good we are. It's not that. I mean, we have a lot of issues that we need to fight for. But when we constantly hear in this focus on LGBTQ rights in Israel, while ignoring what's going on throughout the Middle East, in every country in the Middle East, and how gay rights are still LGBTQ people are still not protected. That's something that we must all speak up about, and we all must fight. And that's what Pride is about. Pride was a riot. It was fighting against violence, against intolerance, and changing people's mind. And that's something that I think we all have the obligation to do, to speak up for those invisible people that the word is completely ignored. Paul, should we take some questions, or because I can keep on talking, but I would love to hear because I'm seeing just questions popping up. So
absolutely, kind of fascinating, and honestly, you could keep going. We could keep listening. The story writes itself. But I think let's go to some questions, and I think you can elaborate on your story through the questions.
Yeah.
So let me go through, bearing in mind, everybody, thank you all for your questions. Fantastic that you're engaging. We will try to get as many questions as possible. We've got some on the chat, we've got some on the Facebook, we've got a whole lot. So let's see if we can get through as many as we can. So Hen, one of the first questions we had is, do you know in which year it became legal to be gay in the IDF? And also, is the IDF possibly the first army in the world to openly permit gays into service with no form of sanction?
So I'm not sure about if it was the first. It was definitely part of the first, one of the first armies to allow it. But the great thing about the Israeli army, about the IDF, is that we're saying, there's a saying in Israel that everyone knows, that Tzava boneh am boneh tzava, which means that the people, the Israeli people, are building the army, and the army builds the people. So everyone that are going through the army are, we are creating what the Israeli army is, and then the Israeli army actually creates the Israeli society that comes after. That goes to the point about protecting and decriminalizing same-sex relationship. Everything that is happening in the public in Israel affects the army. So when the government passed this law to protect same-sex relationship, it automatically was adopted by the Israeli army. And it's Israeli army today is, I know that they are so tolerant. From I have transgender friends that are serving in the army that are able to do it, and the army is so well adjusted and taking care of them and their needs, actually sponsoring treatment for gender dysphoria and helping transgender people go through the operation and funding that, which this is definitely the only army in the world that is doing that. That supports. I mean, even in America, there was a question about if the army should allow trans people to serve openly. So the IDF is definitely leading in this field, and it's again, it's really part of what's going on in the Israeli society, and because it's a mandatory service, the IDF is trying to, from top down, to make sure that soldiers have all the conditions they need to serve the army in the best way they can, to serve the country in the best way they can, because it's a mandatory service, because we don't have many people here, and we have to, every soldier matters, and you really feel that, it's with all of its flaws, the army still is able to provide a supporting environment for soldiers, and that's for young people, and that's I think it's very important.
Okay, let's. I mean, the army is a big topic, to be fair, and I'm sure it also depends on which units you're in, which areas of the army. I suppose it depends in whether in the Air Force, the Navy, or Sadir in the ground forces. So, but I'm sure you could elaborate on all that. I've had a couple of questions, a few questions. I'm going to try and join them together on gay Palestinians. And first of all, a couple of the questions are, if you could just elaborate what it's like to be a gay person or LGBTQ plus person in a Palestinian society. And secondly, is there any way Israel supports these Palestinians, possibly by refuge? If you can elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, definitely. So if we'll start with the Palestinian society and the intolerance that still exists in the Palestinian society, I think it was there was a Pew research in 2013, I believe, that found that I think something like 93% of Palestinians that were asked answered that being gay is immoral and a sin against God. And when you get 30%, 40%, 50, even 80%, that's a lot. But when 93% had this answer, and I think like 5% were just refused to answer. There was only 1% that said that it's okay and that it's moral. It tells you a lot about a society. And actually got a quote from 2019 Palestinian Security Forces spokesperson Colonel Luai Izrikat. He described activism for LGBTQ rights as a blow to and violation of ideals and values of Palestinian society. He responded to the Palestinian Authority decision to ban Palestinian gay and transgender rights group from holding an event in the West Bank and threatening to arrest the participants. All of this is not meant to, and it's very important that people understand that it's not meant to taint Palestinian people in a certain way. It's just telling you that the leadership and the officials from the government down to the police, to the head of the police or the spokesperson of the police, are tells on record gives a quote that's saying that gays and that LGBTQ rights is not something that aligns with the Palestinian ideals and values, which is just disgusting. And I think that if you go to the West Bank and I spend a lot of time there, it's the treatment of LGBTQ people is done in much in mockery and attacks, and there's every few weeks a case of violence against LGBTQ Palestinians, and they certainly get refuge in Israel. I was involved in a few cases like this that we can't really go to BBC and tell them that that we're doing it because we have to protect the identity of those Palestinian LGBTQ people. But when we find cases that we can help, we are helping, and we're helping with everything from giving them new identity and helping them move to Tel Aviv. Oftentimes, I think in every case that I was involved in, the new name and the new identity is a Jewish Israeli identity, and they completely leave behind all of the everything they went through, and it's really sad and disheartening to see it. But I'm also happy that Israel can offer them this refuge. And I was involved in several cases like this. I read online that people say that Israel is using LGBTQ folks, Palestinian ones, for intelligence, and that's something that is completely false from my experience working with the Shin Bet in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria, and being involved with them. It's nothing that I've never ever heard of. There were cases that LGBTQ Palestinians would come to our office, because my unit has offices in every major Palestinian city where Palestinians come to our reception hall, and they can speak to soldiers. And if they have cases that they need help with, we're trying to help. And many times we had Palestinian LGBTQ people coming to us and asking for help, and it's a process. So we can't really, we're trying to help as much as we can. And at least like 2 or 3 times that I had Palestinians that came to us, told us that they have an issue, and then they disappear the following day. It's not a random thing. It happens very often, and it's sad, and I wish we could do more. And I'm hearing all those. There's a few big Palestinian LGBTQ groups that are trying to promote LGBTQ rights in the Palestinian territories, and they're all working from within Israel, because they know that they won't be able to do anything in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and Gaza. And part of it's, what's really sad is to see that they are, when they speak about those oppressions, they accuse Israel, and they're blaming Israel for the problems that they have, instead of really showing appreciation that, on the one side of the fence, they get safe space to do what they need to do, and on the other side, they're being attacked. And instead of supporting, and instead of being open and really honest about the situation, I read a lot of their statement. It's very deceiving. I guess it comes a lot from the need of being loyal, and if you're already considered, and I know it from my own experience with my community, that sometimes you feel like you have such a burden of shame that you're trying to show that you are at least loyal in many other ways. And I guess this is where it's coming from. But, the situation there is not really pleasant, and there's much more work to be done, but it can only be done once we acknowledge the situation. And unfortunately, I don't think anyone is really serious about acknowledging the situation. And the only victims are Palestinian LGBTQ people.
Fascinating. Hen, could you tell us a little bit about when you travel overseas? You've mentioned a little bit about people throwing either hypocrisy claims at you, or duplicitous claims, or paradoxical. I don't know, all the different potential labels that they throw at you, because I don't think it's possible. People can't get it around their heads that Israel is so advanced, and here's the proof. But hold on, I have a preconception about Israel, and it doesn't fit. Tell me, what's your experience on the campuses, and what's your experience around the world when you do these talks, and any strange experiences that you've come across?
Wow. Yeah. So, well, I mean, the best example would be London, that you probably remember that 300 students broke my talk and tried to stop me from speaking at University College London, just to make sure that a person that is of Iraqi and Tunisian background and is openly gay will not be able to speak and share his story. In the same year, they had generals from the IDF speaking at UCL. They had people that were combat soldiers coming and speaking. They were okay with all of them speaking, but the only person that they went out of their way, got 300 people, jumped through windows, like broke the door, tried to break down the door, really were violent to other students, was me. And I think that I don't think it's about anything I say. You know, I mean, of course, if I'll be very anti-Israel, they would love me, and I'll probably get you know, more speaking gigs and get money thrown at me, as I see some of my not colleagues but people on the other side that are falling to this anti-Israel propaganda. But you know, I can't do it. I have to be true to who I am, and I think that they really are annoyed by my existence, and that I represent again, majority of Jews in Israel that are Mizrahim and that are people that never left the Middle East. All Jews started from here, of course, from Judea, but just the fact that majority of the population is population of Middle Eastern people completely, you know, shatters the anti-Israel narrative. And I actually there was an article claiming that me personally, I'm Mizrahi washing. Mizrahi washing is a new term that basically saying that the fact that I speak about Mizrahi people is meant to divert the attention from the horrible treatment of Palestinians that allegedly Israel is responsible for. You know, I wish I could just I wish I don't know. I mean, I think I got to a point that I'm so I'm not blasé, but I'm just like cynical about all of it because it's becoming so ridiculous. But then I remind myself that while it is ridiculous for me, for you, Paul, for people that are watching us, for other people, it's not ridiculous. And when my non-Jewish boyfriend from London is sending me posts about pinkwashing, and he says, you know, I see a lot of my friends engaging with it and believing what it says there, that if you are, and I mean, it's so insane that people are telling, you know, LGBTQ people believe that in order to support LGBTQ rights, you have to oppose and boycott the only country that has LGBTQ rights because of its oppression of other LGBTQ people. But I mean, you completely ignore everywhere else in the Middle East and everywhere else in North Africa and everywhere else in China. And I mean, is the fact that there's police brutality in America against Black people means that we should not go out and protest for pride, that we should not celebrate LGBTQ rights in America. It's just, it's not a lot of people saying it, that it's not a double standard, it's a single standard to Israel, really, you know, trying to erase any positive, anything that is good about Israel. And that's, and so that's, you know, to answer your question, at some point I'm like, I'm not even surprised about any accusation, but you know what, I do have one story. I was speaking at university in California, and there were a group of like 10 people that came to protest, and they shouted and shouted. I started my talk. When I started my talk, they stopped and they sat down. And there was one, most of them were young students. One of them was an older woman. And at the end of my talk, she raised her hand. She said, well, you know, all this pinkwashing, and accused me and stuff. And she said, just so you know, I'm a professor here in this university, and I have a question for you. And I wanted to know how many Palestinians were raped by Israeli soldiers in the last 5 years. And I said, well, that's a great question. I know the answer because the number is close to zero. There were, in terms of sexual harassment reports, there wasn't even one report from Palestinian about Israeli soldiers sexually harassing them. And she says, yeah, I know that. And I said, okay, so what's the question? And she said, I have a research here that proves that the Israeli army and Israelis are so racist that you are disgusted by the Palestinians. And it's clearly showing that because you're racist, you're not raping them. So you need to be ashamed of yourself. I just stood there and I was shocked by hearing that. And I actually found a research online that was conducted in the Hebrew University, no less, that found that the reason that there's no sexual harassment, I'm sorry, I'm laughing about it, but it's really sad. It's really sad. It's, you know, that's what we're doing.
The worst I've heard. It's the worst line I've heard, and I've heard a lot. That is, how do you respond to that without going? I mean, it's crazy. I
asked her after a while, I said, so what is the number of rapes that a country should have in order to not be racist? What would be a good number in your insane mind? But, you know, they'll go that far. And that's a professor in a university that is teaching other students and probably teaching them this research that she found that proves that the IDF is racist because they're not raping women.
Yet there are instances of marriages between Israelis and Palestinians, or Israelis and Israeli Arabs and Israelis.
Yeah.
That's kosher, honestly. Unless we could go on fair about that. Ken, I want to come back. There's a few more questions about the lifestyle and the rights that you have. And you mentioned a lot about Tel Aviv, and it's very openly accepted in Tel Aviv, probably more than anywhere else in the country. The question is, what is it like in the rest of the country? Is there a separation between Tel Aviv and the rest? And secondly, also, how long do you think it will take Israel to catch up for the LGBTQ community to catch up to full heterosexual rights that they have?
Okay, so I think a change is coming. I'm hopeful. I would give it like, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. We'll have to see. It's all depending on the government and what the results of the elections will be, and if it will be a priority for them. But Israelis just in many ways are just learning to live with what we have. You know, if it's the land that we have, or if it's the area and the enemies or whatever it is, we're learning how to deal with it. And I think in like this, the fact that many same-sex couples are traveling abroad and coming back is. It's okay. I mean, they're learning how to live with it, but I don't know if it really helps promoting this issue. So I'm hopeful that this will change soon. I can't really estimate. And your first question, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Just regarding the geography, LGBT geography. Tel Aviv seems to be open. What's it like in the rest?
Right. So, I mean, it's Tel Aviv is really not an example of the rest of Israel in terms of how inclusive it is and how welcoming it is. My boyfriend that comes with me from London, he lives in Tottenham area, and he says how he feels safe there. But then when he comes here, he says that he feels even more safe than he does back home. To hold hands together or to be in public together. That's it's really safe, and you feel it in the streets. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in other areas in Israel. In Jerusalem, that just a few years ago, a teenage girl was, Israeli girl was killed in the Pride Parade by a radical, fanatic person that went and Israeli and Jewish person actually that stabbed her. But that's something that was condemned everywhere in Israel, and it's and the Jerusalem Open House received a big funding, and they really are doing an amazing work there to support LGBTQ folks in Jerusalem. And this year, just last year, there was about 20 pride parades all over, or 30, I think even more than 30 pride parades in other cities. It wasn't as big as the Tel Aviv one, but the fact that other cities in Israel are holding some sort of an event for LGBTQ rights is making a big difference. And while it's not the same, while not all of Israel is like Tel Aviv, when you watch the Israeli TV, when you're seeing the Israeli Knesset, LGBTQ people are very visible in the news, in TV shows, in everywhere. They're very visible, and I think that the more visibility you have in the public, in general public, when you go out of the LGBTQ group that you're part of, you're making this is part of making a big difference and making a change for other LGBTQ people. So Tel Aviv is I think it's very unique and very special from any other city in the world, but it's also I'm carefully saying it's safe and we're heading towards progress in other places. I don't know, there is stories of violence against LGBTQ people in other countries, in other cities in Israel, but it's not, but it is safe, That makes sense.
I'm going to move subject a little bit topic. A good question from Mike. What do you think? What are your thoughts of our new ambassador, Israeli ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hotovely?
What do I think about her?
Yes. And what do you think of the position of her specifically chosen as ambassador to the UK?
Wow. I think that, I don't know, I mean, given past statements that I've heard from her, specifically regarding diaspora Jews and specifically about diaspora Jews. I think that it's I'm not sure if it's the right position for someone like that. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not representing the Israeli government in any way or shape. Although if you read online, there's some people suggest that I am basically the head of Mossad. But right. But so just that's just my personal opinion. I think there are other better candidates that could have taken this important job. I mean, Mark Regev, I think, is just phenomenal, for example. So.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm just going to go on to, there's so many questions. A lot of it you've covered already. Some of them were talking about, people asking about the partnerships within Israel. So same-sex partnerships within the Arab community, Arab-Israeli community, and the Christian community. Are you aware of how they're dealing with it? Are they able to express themselves?
I mean, I know that if you go to gay bars in Tel Aviv, you'll see Arab gays and Muslim and Christian gays, Arab Israelis. I mean, so you see them. I mean, they exist and they're able to do it inside Israel. They're able to live their authentic life inside Israel. So it's really open. I actually, that something that is more interesting is to see Mizrahi LGBTQ people in Tel Aviv and how they come from the periphery into Tel Aviv and adopting a whole, really able to live their authentic life while leaving behind where they're in their cities. Many times the family would reject them and they have to start on new. And that's sad, but I'm hoping that in a generation or two, things will change. I mean, I already see how things are changing. But I think Tel Aviv is probably the only place where there was a Mizrahi gay party that, you have Mizrahi Jewish singers. It's called Arisa, and it's like it used to be a big party line. After with the Corona and everything, it kind of slowed down, but it used to be a big party line with Mizrahi Hebrew music, with Eastern Eastern music with Hebrew singers, and that was a big draw in Israel. So it was I think that's a microcosmos of this of Israel.
Coming back to the advocacy, it's very difficult to deal with. One of the questions dealing with how do you deal with all the many issues? We have the same struggle when a commentator or media broadcaster when you're in debating, the question is riddled with so many different inaccuracies that you don't know where to begin to start unraveling the lies and the misinformation. So it's very difficult to deal with everything. But one of the specific issues which we found to be quite effective, and we'd like to hear your opinion on it, certainly as a Mizrahi Jew, about dealing with, certainly with it's connected together with the right to the term and the Nakba of the Jewish people. We were talking about Dror Yemini, who wrote a book on this. Have you found that to be accepted, dealing with the disposition of Jews from Arab lands in all that time and how they have no rights of return in the same sense as the Palestinians? And is this taught in the schools? Do Israeli schools teach that as part of the curriculum?
Wow, we need a whole separate Zoom call to go over all of this. But I think it's certainly the most important part of advocacy in this time of Israel that is missing. I mean, a lot of things that are important, of course, but I think this is such a part that has been intentionally erased from the debate. In Israel, they're changing it. I mean, today you have more Mizrahi poets and Mizrahi history being taught. I remember that I grew up, I wasn't taught in high school or any, not even in elementary school about our history. The only history we learned about was, of what happened. And there's no, like, one doesn't come on top of the other, or the account of the other. Like, it's, we need to learn about the Holocaust, and the Holocaust was the biggest human tragedy, not only for Jews, in mankind. But I think that in Israel, we shied away from speaking about the Jews from the Middle East and North Africa because of the importance that we gave, the justified importance that we gave to the horrific genocide that we went through. But I think, we have to be able to speak about both traumas, and I think that there's an intention. There's an intention behind this. All those attacks that I'm seeing lately about the Mizrahi washing, and how Jews are actually Mizrahi Jews are Arab Jews that were we were in the Middle East long before the Arab conquest of the Middle East. We are the indigenous community of this area. And I'm seeing people saying that Israeli food is stolen from Arab countries. It's not stolen; it's food that we had and we brought with us to this country. And I think it really shatters this narrative that Israel is this white country that is fighting brown people. When you tell them, look at the food, look at the music, and I see that some anti-Zionist, like young Jewish anti-Zionist that I speak with are. I think where they're coming from is because they can't really relate to Israel, because they expect Israel to be, Bagel and Lox and Barbara Streisand and Yiddish, and they come here and they hear Arabic and they're hearing Mizrahi music and they're seeing hummus and shawarma, and it's a lot of things that they didn't associate with what being Jewish is. And I think the more we expand it and the more we explain to young Jews all over the world that there's more than one way of being Jewish, and we're all Jews. It doesn't matter. I mean, we all must fight anti-Semitism together, because anti-Semites hate us because we're Jews, not because we're Mizrahi or Ashkenazi. It doesn't matter. But if we expand this conversation and we include those communities and we teach young people that being Jewish is diverse and the Jewish world is so beautiful and so diverse, it will change our community. It will make our kids stronger, but it will also send a very strong message. When people would, just like you said, instead of having to deal with all those false allegations about Israel every time, someone interviews you, just if this would be known, if we'll talk more about that, we will make a big difference. And I'm actually doing it these days when I'm working on my first book. It's called Mizrahi, a Jew of Color. It's going to come out in next year, and it's basically outlining this history that is missing, and really trying to bridge this gap that I really think is the key to fighting a lot of the hatred we're seeing. Not all of it. Anti-Semitism is still going to be there, but at least a lot of the misconception, and can change hearts and minds, I believe.
Wow, fantastic. It is such a big topic, the Mizrahi topic, within Israel itself. And I think you're right. It first needs to be dealt with within the society. Israel now is even more diverse, with Soviet Jews, with Ethiopian Jews, and certainly the Arab Israeli population and the Haredi populations. We really are one big Holland in a big country. Let me ask you one final question, Hen. I mean, it's been phenomenal, and we can literally listen to you all night, and we wouldn't want to keep you from other Zoom. But let us ask you one question. What can we do as a community to help out? How can we, firstly, relating and listening to what you have to say, and when we come to Israel, but is there anything we can do, the way we communicate, either the way that we relate in Israel itself, or the way we understand, to help the rest of the country understand as well that your fight, your plight? What would your advice be to the rest of us?
Well, first of all, clearly supporting the Zionist Federation and continuing programs like this, because this really makes it's I said I'm invited to some Zooms in America, but this is the only one. Well, I might have another one, but this is the first time that a UK organization is interested in this story, and this about LGBT, first about LGBTQ rights in Israel, but also about Mizrahim. And it's, I think your work is tremendously important. So supporting the Zionist Federation is very important. And I think that, doing those interviews, being engaging, sharing those ideas online, each one of the people that are listening to us probably has about 100 or even if less Facebook friends, and they can all be ambassadors of education. And by sharing one story about Mizrahim or about LGBTQ rights, something positive, and teaching others, we can make a difference. That's how anti-Israel propaganda works, because they're miseducating people. We can really educate with the truth and the facts, because the truth is on our side. You know, we don't have to work that hard. Like if everyone would just know the real facts, we can make a massive difference. And when you come into Israel, instead of only going to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, which is great, and I think it's important to come to those cities, try and go a bit outside of Tel Aviv, to the periphery of Israel. Even if you stay in Tel Aviv, try and go to the LGBTQ center or Ethiopian center. There's a new Ethiopian center that was open in Florentine. It's called Beta. And I can send you information about that later. But learn about different communities in Israel, and go outside go to the Western Wall, go to the beach in Tel Aviv, enjoy Israel, because I don't want you not to enjoy it, because that's why we love it. But expand your horizons, and I think that will serve everyone very well. It will serve you, but then it will also serve the cause, because you will have experiences that will go with you, and then you can share them with others.
Fantastic. We will do that. We will try to, and we will keep in contact with you, and we will do this again. And hopefully, once we've passed this COVID crisis, we'll have you in person as well again, and you can come and speak. It would be fantastic. Ben, you're a wonderful example of a modern Israeli Zionist. I mean, I can keep adding labels, so I'm going to stop at some point. Wonderful Mizrahi Zionist LGBTQ citizen, and certainly advocate, and a wonderful ambassador for a modern Israel. And the rest are catching up, and it's going to take time. And I think I love the fact that it's going to take time, and I love the fact that you have so much tolerance for that. That Israel so well, the people, and it really is just a matter of time, is what we're saying. And that tolerance itself is an example to the rest of us, and to all of us, to say, okay, you know what, you're in this position, you have the tolerance, certainly we should learn from that. So thank you for joining us, thank you for explaining it to us, thank you for keeping us enlightened. Please keep in contact. If there's anything you need from us, let us know. I want to thank all of our audience for engaging with us, for keeping connected, for staying in touch. Please all go onto social media and follow Hen, so you can see and you can keep updated, and you can follow on with this. This is just an opening discussion. This should now continue. This should now follow on. Hen has just opened the door. You need to make the rest of the effort and the rest of the work. That's what we need to take from this. So thank you all for joining us. Keep in contact. Stay safe, and hope to see you soon. I've been Paul Charney. We've been the ZF and the WZO, and you've been fantastic. Thank you, and good night.